I've been a night shift nurse for over 8 years, and let me tell you, I've seen my fair share of things that just don't make sense. Hospitals are strange places at night. But what happened in room 309? That's the reason I will never, ever work a shift alone after midnight. It was a Thursday, I remember, because it was payday, and everyone at the nurses' station was buzzing about their weekend plans. Around 11:30 p.m., I was assigned to do the routine vitals check on a patient named Mrs. Hartley. She was an elderly woman, sweet but very sick, admitted with a severe case of pneumonia. Her room was 309, right at the end of the hall. The moment I stepped inside, the atmosphere changed. You know that feeling when the air just gets heavy? Like a weight pressing down on you? As the door clicked shut behind me, the lights flickered. Just once, but it was enough to make me pause. Mrs. Hartley was asleep, her breathing soft and regular under her oxygen mask. The room was quiet, except for the gentle hiss of the oxygen and the rhythmic beep of the monitors. I went about my work, adjusting her for drip, noting down her vitals on the chart. Everything seemed normal. I finished up and turned to leave. That's when I heard it. A faint voice, barely a whisper. "Don't leave me alone." I stopped dead in my tracks and turned back to the bed. Mrs. Hartley's eyes were still closed. Her breathing hadn't changed. I figured she must have been dreaming, talking in her sleep. It happens all the time with elderly patients, especially when they're on medication. I took a step toward the door again. Then the voice came again, but this time it was clearer, stronger, and it wasn't her voice. It was raspy, cold, and it seemed to come from right behind me. He's standing right behind you. Every single hair on my body stood on end. My blood ran cold. I was completely frozen, too terrified to even breathe, let alone turn around. The temperature in the room plummeted. I could actually see my own breath misting in the air, which was impossible. The hospital's heating was always cranked up. My heart was hammering against my ribs. I knew I had to look. I had to know if someone was there. Slowly, forcing my muscles to obey, I spun around. There was nothing. Just the empty space of the room, the open doorway, and the dim, long shadow of the hallway stretching out beyond it. My mind raced, trying to find a logical explanation. Old buildings make noises. The wiring is ancient, so lights flicker. A draft from a window can make a room feel cold. I was just tired, overworked. My mind was playing tricks on me. That's what I told myself as I practically fled from the room, my hand shaking as I pulled the door shut. I went straight back to the brightly lit nurses' station, trying to shake off the feeling of dread. I didn't tell anyone what happened. I mean, what would I even say? I think a ghost told me he was standing behind me. They'd think I was crazy. I tried to bury myself in my work, charting, answering calls, anything to keep my mind occupied. About 20 minutes later, a shrill, frantic alarm sliced through the quiet hum of the unit. The heart monitor. A stomach dropped when I saw the room number flashing on the central display, 309. I grabbed another nurse, a guy named Mark, and we sprinted down the hall. When we burst into the room, the scene was horrifying. Mrs. Hartley was sitting bolt upright in her bed. Her eyes were wide open, staring at a blank spot on the ceiling. But she wasn't breathing. Her chest was perfectly still. We immediately started the code blue protocol. I jumped onto the bed and started chest compressions. Mark got the crash cart. We worked on her for what felt like an eternity CPR, shocking her with the defibrillator, pushing every emergency drug we had, but nothing worked. There was no response. She was gone. Finally, the doctor called it. Time of death, 12:14 a.m. The room fell silent again, except for our heavy breathing. As we started to disconnect the equipment, a flicker of movement caught my eye. A reflection in the dark glass of the window. It was a man, tall and unnaturally thin, dressed in what looked like old, tattered clothing. He was standing right behind me, just like the voice had said. Whipped around so fast I nearly fell over. But again, there was nothing there. The space where he'd been was completely empty. Mark looked at me, concerned. "You okay? You look like you've seen a ghost." I couldn't even answer him, just nodded, my throat too tight to speak. The next day, the maintenance crew went into room 309 to clean and prepare it for the next patient. They called us down to the floor an hour later. It found something. Scratched deep into the plaster of the wall, right next to where Mrs. Hartley's bed had been, were 3 words. Words that hadn't been there the day before. The paint was fresh, and the scratches were raw. They looked like they'd been clawed into the wall with fingernails. The words were, "He's still here." I haven't been able to shake that night. That cold, that voice, that reflection in the glass. Some things you see on the night shift, you can explain away, but not room 309, not him. Thanks for listening to my story. It's a bit heavy, I know, but it's something I had to share. If you have stories of your own, I'd love to hear them in the comments. If you enjoyed this, please consider liking and subscribing for more tales from the night shift. Have you ever worked the night shift? That deep, dead part of the night when the world outside is asleep, but you're wide awake, surrounded by a silence that feels ... heavy. I used to. I was a security guard at a massive city hospital in Baltimore. We pulled 12-hour shifts, and let me tell you, the nights were a different beast altogether. From midnight to dawn, that place transformed. The daytime chaos would melt away, leaving behind this eerie, unsettling quiet that seemed to amplify every little sound. The hum of the fluorescent lights, the distant beep of a machine, the creak of the building settling. It all felt louder. My beat was the basement. Down there, you had the laundry facilities, massive supply rooms, and the morgue. It was always cold, the air thick with the scent of antiseptic and something else, something older. There was this one elevator, a real relic, that connected the morgue directly to the ICU. It was ancient, a rattling metal box that groaned and shuddered its way between floors. The staff hated it. It was notorious for getting stuck, the doors jamming, the lights flickering. We mostly avoided it, but it was part of the patrol route. You had to check it. One particular night, it was around 3 a.m., the witching hour, they call it. I was doing my usual sweep, walking the long, sterile corridors of the basement, my footsteps echoing off the tiled floors. It was dead quiet. Unusually so. I was just passing the laundry area, heading toward the morgue when I heard it. Sharp, metallic asterisk, ding, asterisk, that cut through the silence. I stopped, my ears straining. It was the morgue elevator. I turned the corner and saw its heavy metal doors sliding open, all by themselves. I just stood there for a second, my heart doing a little tap dance against my ribs. I stared into the empty elevator car. The single light bulb inside was flickering erratically, casting dancing shadows. I looked up at the digital display above the door. It was glitching out, flashing between B for basement and 3 for the third floor ICU. Probably just a short circuit. I muttered to myself, trying to brush it off. Old building, old wiring. It made sense. I started to turn away, ready to continue my patrol and just log it as a maintenance issue. But then I heard it. A sound from inside the elevator. A soft, shuffling noise. Like someone dragging their feet across the metal floor. Slowly, deliberately, my training kicked in. I spun back around, my hand instinctively going to the heavy mag light on my belt. I flicked it on, the powerful beam cutting through the dim light. Security, I called out, my voice sounding way too loud in the empty hall. Is anyone in there? Silence. Just the hum of the building and the frantic beat of my own heart. I took a cautious step forward, then another, until I was right at the threshold of the open doors. I leaned in, shining my flashlight into every corner of the small space. Nothing. It was completely empty. But then my light caught something on the floor. A footprint, a bare footprint. And it was wet, glistening under the beam of my flashlight, as if someone had just stepped out of a shower. The print led from the center of the car towards the far corner, but there was no one there. The trail just stopped. Before my brain could even process what I was seeing, the door slammed shut with a deafening bang that made me jump back. The force of it seemed to shake the whole hallway. And then the elevator started to move. The motor whined to life, and I could hear the cables straining as the car began its ascent. Watched, completely frozen, as the floor indicator above the door lit up. It wasn't going to the ICU on the 3rd floor, flickered past 1, 2, 3, and then stopped on 4. The 4th floor. That's what made the hair on my arms stand up. The 4th floor had been under renovation for months. It was a ghost floor, completely sealed off. No staff, no patients, nothing. Why would the elevator go there? My radio, which had been silent all night, suddenly crackled with a burst of static. I fumbled for it, shouting my location, trying to get a response from the main desk, but all I got back was more static. Something was wrong. I abandoned my patrol and bolted for the stairwell, taking the concrete steps 2 at a time. My heart was pounding in my chest, my breath coming in ragged gasps. The whole way up, my radio was just hissing and crackling. It was like something was interfering with the signal. When I finally burst through the fire door onto the 4th floor, I was met with darkness and a thick layer of construction dust hanging in the air. The hallway was a skeleton, with exposed wires hanging from the ceiling and plastic sheets covering doorways. And right in the middle of it all, the morgue elevator doors stood wide open, spilling their weak, flickering light into the gloom. And then I saw it. Positioned directly in the center of the corridor, about 20 feet from the elevator, was a gurney. A hospital gurney with a body on it, completely covered by a clean white sheet. The scene was so out of place, so impossible, that for a moment I thought I was hallucinating. I took a slow step forward, my flashlight beam trembling in my hand. Then another. And sticking out from the bottom was a foot with a paper tag tied around the big toe. I leaned down, my hand shaking so badly I could barely hold the flashlight steady. I aimed the beam at the tag. Hush. It didn't have a name or a date of death. The only thing written on it, in stark black ink, was subject, unknown. That was it. No patient ID, no morgue reference number, just those 2 words. My blood ran cold. My mind was racing, trying to make sense of any of it. Who was this? How did they get here? And that's when my radio screamed. It wasn't just static this time. A loud, sharp hiss erupted from the speaker, so intense it hurt my ears. And through that wall of noise, a voice came through. It was distorted, raspy, like it was being dragged up from the bottom of a well. It said 3 words, "Send it back down." I spun around, sweeping my flashlight beam across the dark, empty hallway. "Who's there?" I yelled. There was nobody, just me, the dust, and the echo of my own voice. When I turned back, my heart stopped. The gurney was gone, vanished. The only thing left was the white sheet, lying in a crumpled heap on the dusty floor. It was as if the body and the gurney had just evaporated into thin air. I stood there for what felt like an eternity, just staring at the empty sheet, before I finally found my legs and ran. I didn't stop until I was back in the brightly lit security office. The next morning, my shift was finally over. I couldn't shake what had happened. Before I left, I went down to the morgue. The attendant, a quiet guy named Dave, was just starting his day. I asked him, trying to sound casual, if there had been any late-night transports. Any reason for that old elevator to be running? He looked at his logbook and shook his head. Nope, he said. The last run was just before 11 p.m. Been quiet ever since. He was about to turn away, but then he paused. That's weird, though, he added, tapping a line in the book. What is? I asked. He looked at me, a strange expression on his face. We did get an intake last night, an unclaimed body, a John Doe they found. They logged him in the freezer. He pointed to the entry, and that's the part that I'll never forget. The part that still makes my blood run cold whenever I think about it. He said the temporary tag number they assigned to the body was 0004, tag number 4, the 4th floor. I handed in my resignation that day and never worked another night shift again. Thanks for watching, and if you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more. Stay safe out there. Have you ever worked a job where things just didn't feel right? A place where the silence is louder than any noise, and the shadows seem to move when you're not looking? Well, I have a story for you. It's not just a story I heard, it's a story I lived. For years, I was a respiratory therapist, and my post was the late shift in the children's hospital wing. Let me tell you, it was the hardest place to be after midnight. You see, a children's hospital during the day is full of life, laughter, and the sounds of cartoons, but at night, it transforms. It's quiet, almost unnaturally so. The halls are sterile, and all those bright colors and happy toys on the walls, they just feel wrong in the dark. They look like sad, forgotten relics. It's an atmosphere that can really get under your skin, especially when you're walking the halls alone. And there was one hallway in particular that gave everyone, and I mean everyone, the creeps. It was known as Wing C. None of the staff liked to walk through it alone after the sun went down. The nurses, the janitors, even the seasoned doctors, they'd all find an excuse to take the long way around or grab a buddy. The reason? People said they heard things. Specifically, they said they sometimes heard a child crying when all the rooms in that wing were completely empty. Now, I've always been a skeptic, a person of science. I deal with machines, data, and biology. Ghosts, spirits, not my thing? I'd hear the stories nod along, but inside I was thinking, yes, just the old building settling, or someone's just overtired. I'd pat a nervous colleague on the back and tell them it was their imagination playing tricks on them. I never believed in any of that stuff, not for a second, until last winter. That's when everything changed for me. It was around 2 a.m., deep into the quietest part of the night. The hospital was a ghost town, with just the hum of the ventilators and the occasional beep from a distant monitor. Suddenly, the silence was shattered by a code alarm. It wasn't a code blue for a cardiac arrest, but something just as urgent and a whole lot stranger. The alarm was for critically low oxygen levels, coming from an empty patient room. Think about that for a second. An emergency alarm from a room where no one was supposed to be. That alone was bizarre. Our systems are designed to only monitor occupied beds. No patient, no alarm. I checked the board, my heart starting to pound a little faster. The room number was C-112. Of course, it had to be in Wing C. My stomach dropped. I grabbed my gear and started walking, telling myself there had to be a logical explanation. A system glitch. A faulty sensor. Anything but what the whispers in the hallways suggested. As I got closer to Wing C, the air seemed to get heavier, colder. I pushed through the double doors and headed down that dreaded hallway. My footsteps echoed unnervingly. I reached room C-112 and hesitated for just a moment before pushing the door open. The first thing I noticed was the light. The room's lights were dim, but they were flickering erratically, casting long, dancing shadows on the walls. It felt like being in a horror movie. And then the cold hit me. It wasn't just cool. It was a deep, biting cold, the kind that feels like it's coming from inside you. It was easily 10 degrees colder than the hallway I had just left. My breath fogged in front of my face. My eyes went to the patient monitor by the empty bed. It was beeping steadily, displaying vital signs of heart rate, a respiratory rate, an oxygen saturation level that was plummeting. The screen showed it was tracking a patient ID, but when I later tried to look it up, that ID didn't exist anywhere in our hospital system. It was a ghost in the machine. And that's when I heard it. It started soft, almost imperceptible. A child crying. It was a weak, shaky sound filled with a kind of despair that just rips your heart out. The sobs seemed to be coming from the far side of the empty hospital bed. My training kicked in, pushing the fear down. My first thought was that a child from another room had wandered in and was lost or scared. "Hello?" said my voice, sounding way calmer than I felt. "Sweetie, are you lost? It's okay. I can help you." The moment the words left my mouth, the crying stopped. Instantly, the silence that followed was somehow even more terrifying. Every hair on my arm stood on end. I took a slow, deliberate step toward the bed, my rubber-soled shoes squeaking on the linoleum floor. I peered around the side, fully expecting to see a small child huddled in the corner, hiding from me. But there was nothing. The corner was completely empty, just a wall, a floor, and a terrifying, empty space where the sound had been. My heart was hammering against my ribs now, and then everything went insane. The metal four-stand next to the bed began to rattle. It wasn't a small tremor. It was shaking violently, as if an invisible hand was grabbing it and shaking it with all its might. My eyes darted from the four-stand back to the monitor. The heart rate on the screen, which had been steady, suddenly spiked into a frantic, impossible rhythm and then flatlined. A long, continuous, high-pitched tone filled the room, the tone of death. I was frozen. Pure primal fear had taken over my body. Couldn't move, couldn't breathe. I just stood there, staring at the empty bed and the screaming monitor. I stumbled backward, my hand fumbling for the door handle. I had to get out. And then I heard the voice. It wasn't coming from the corner anymore. It came from the speaker built into the wall above the bed, the one used for the nurse call system. Through a crackle of static, a little girl's voice whispered two words that will haunt me for the rest of my life. "It hurts." The whisper was so clear, so close, it felt like she was standing right beside me, breathing into my ear. The second she finished speaking, every single alarm in the room started blaring at once. The bed alarm, the four-pump alarm, the heart monitor, a chaotic symphony of terror. The lights, which had been flickering, now flashed on and off, like a strobe light in a nightmare that broke the spell. I ran. I didn't even look back. I burst out into the hallway, gasping for air, and sprinted to the nurse's station, yelling for security and maintenance. I must have looked like I'd seen a ghost because everyone just stared at me. When maintenance finally arrived, we went back together. The room was silent and still. The alarms were off. The monitor was dark. They ran diagnostics, checked the wiring, everything. They found nothing wrong. Later, We checked the system logs for that monitor. According to the hospital's official records, the monitor in room C112 had been logged as disconnected and had been out of service for years. It shouldn't have been able to turn on at all, let alone display vitals and sound an alarm. But here's the part that keeps me up at night. It's the part that turned me from a skeptic into someone who doesn't walk down dark hallways alone anymore. Out of a morbid curiosity I couldn't resist, I asked a records clerk to pull the file for the last patient who had occupied that room long term. That room C112 had belonged to a 6-year-old girl. She had passed away there in 2017. Her cause of death was listed as respiratory failure. Her name was Amelia. In her official medical chart, under the Section 4 nurse's notes, there was an entry for her final moments. The nurse had written down the last thing the little girl ever said. Just 2 words. It hurts. I don't work the night shift anymore. I never, ever walk through wings, see some things science just can't explain. Thank you so much for listening to my story. It's a heavy one, I know, but it's one I felt I needed to share. If you have stories like this, I'd love to hear them in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this, please consider hitting that like button and subscribing for more content. It really helps the channel out. Stay safe out there.